Hey guys, tonight you're not walking into a cheerful story about a beloved children's author. You're stepping into a house in Missouri where a 64-year-old woman is holding a letter that makes no sense, where every word on the page is about to crack open a secret that will haunt American literature for the next 90 years, and where a daughter's fingerprints are all over a manuscript that her mother never submitted. Settle in. Get comfortable. Because you are about to live through the moment when Laura Ingalls Wilder discovers that her daughter has been rewriting her life without permission. You're standing in Rocky Ridge Farm, Mansfield, Missouri, in February 1931. Outside, the Depression has turned the entire country into a graveyard of failed dreams. Banks are closing, farms are foreclosing. The air smells like desperation and dust, and inside this small farmhouse the bills are stacked higher than the firewood. Your name is Laura Ingalls Wilder. You're 64 years old, your back aches from decades of farm work, and your hands are rough from a lifetime of survival. 3 years ago you believed you had one last chance to make money from the only thing you had left. Your memories. You wrote them down in pencil on cheap-lined tablets. 74,000 words about your childhood on the prairie, about blizzards and grasshoppers, and a family that kept moving west because staying still meant starving. You called it Pioneer Girl. You handed it to your daughter Rose because Rose was a professional writer, a journalist who had travelled the world and written for the biggest magazines in America. Rose typed it up, sent it to publishers, and every single one rejected it. Too flat, they said. Too factual. No crescendo. The manuscript that was supposed to save you died in a stack of rejection letters, and you went back to mending clothes and worrying about the mortgage. But now, in your hand, is a letter from Alfred A. Knopf, one of the most prestigious publishers in New York. The editor, Marion Fiery, is praising a manuscript called When Grandma Was a Little Girl. She loves it. She wants to publish it. She wants 15,000 more words. You stare at the letter. You never sent a manuscript to Knopf. You never wrote anything called When Grandma Was a Little Girl. You look up at Rose, who is standing in the doorway with her arms crossed, and a look on her face that you cannot quite read. It is not guilt. It is not apology. It is something closer to impatience, as if she has been waiting for you to catch up to a plan she made weeks ago without telling you. Rose speaks first. She says she took your manuscript, the one that failed, and she ran it through her typewriter one more time. She cut it down to 21 pages. She focused on the stories about Pa, about the big woods, about the wolf and the panther and the long winter nights. She made it into a picture book for children. She sent it to Knopf under your name. And now they want more. You do not know whether to feel grateful or betrayed. Rose has done this before, taken your words and rearranged them, polished them, sent them out into the world with her fingerprints all over them. But this time she did not ask. This time she made decisions about your life, your memories, your voice. And she did it in secret. Rose is already talking about the next steps. She tells you to get a tablet, to put down the other 15,000 words, to expand the manuscript into a full book. Her voice is brisk, professional. The voice of someone who knows how publishing works, who has written bestsellers and biographies and novels that made her one of the highest paid journalists in America before the stock market crashed and took everything she owned. And you want to argue. You want to ask why she did not tell you. But you also know that you need this. You need the money. Almanzo, your husband, can barely walk after the diphtheria left him paralysed. The farm is failing, your savings are gone. This letter in your hand is the first piece of good news you have had in years. And it only exists because your daughter rewrote your life without permission. You sit down at the kitchen table, you pick up a pencil, you open a lined tablet, and you begin to write the story of your childhood in the big woods of Wisconsin. The story that will become Little House in the Big Woods. The story that will launch a series of books that will sell 60 million copies and define American childhood for generations. But you do not know that yet. You only know that Rose is standing over your shoulder, watching, waiting, already planning the next edit, the next revision, the next secret she will keep while she turns your memories into something the world will love. And somewhere in the back of your mind a question is forming. A question you will never ask out loud. Whose story is this? Really? Whose voice will the world hear when they read these books? Yours or hers? The answer will take 90 years to uncover. But tonight, in this small farmhouse in Missouri, the collaboration begins. The secret begins, and the lie that will become the truth begins to take shape on the page. You are standing in the wreckage of the American dream, and it smells like burnt crops and broken promises. It is 1930, and the Great Depression has arrived like a plague that does not care about hard work or virtue or the pioneer spirit. The stock market crashed in October 1929, and by the time the dust settled, Rose Wilder Lane had lost everything. Her investments, her savings, her carefully built fortune from years of writing for the Saturday Evening Post and Cosmopolitan, all of it gone. She's 43 years old, divorced, childless, and broke. She has no choice but to return to the place she spent her entire adult life trying to escape. Her parents' farm in Missouri. You watch her arrive with a suitcase and a typewriter, and a look on her face that says she would rather be anywhere else in the world. Rose left this farm when she was 16, desperate to escape the poverty that defined your life, desperate to become someone who mattered. She succeeded. She became a world traveller, a war correspondent, a novelist, a biographer of presidents. She lived in Albania and adopted a refugee boy named Rex Mehta. She dined with famous people and stayed in hotels you could never afford. And now she is back, sleeping in her childhood bedroom because the world collapsed and took her with it. You do not say, "I told you so." You are too tired for that. You and Almanzo are barely surviving. The farm is struggling, the mortgage is due, the bills keep coming. Almanzo can barely walk without his cane, and you are 63 years old, too old to be doing the heavy work that farming requires. You take in sewing to make a few extra dollars. You mend clothes for neighbours who can barely pay. You write articles for the Missouri Ruralist about chickens and butter and how to make $1 stretch. Articles that pay almost nothing. Rose watches you work and you can see the calculation in her eyes. She's thinking about money. She's always thinking about money. She spent the 1920s making a fortune and spending it just as fast, supporting you and Almanzo, building you a fancy house with modern conveniences, sending checks every month. Now the checks have stopped. Now she needs you to support her. But Rose is not the kind of person who accepts charity. She is the kind of person who finds a solution, and the solution she decides is you. She asks if you have ever thought about writing a book. You tell her you have been writing all your life, articles about farm life, columns about chickens and gardens and the price of eggs. But a book? No. You never thought anyone would want to read a book about your life. You were just a farm wife, just another pioneer woman who survived blizzards and droughts, and the death of a baby son you never named. Rose disagrees. She says your stories are gold. She says the pioneer experience is exactly what people want to read, especially now when the Depression has everyone wondering how to survive. She says you should write it all down, everything you remember from your childhood, from the big woods to the prairie to the hard winters in Dakota Territory. Write it all down, she says, and she will help you turn it into something publishers will want. You are skeptical. You have been writing for 20 years, and no one ever called your work gold. But Rose is insistent. She has connections. She has an agent in New York named George By. She knows how publishing works. She knows what editors want. All you have to do is write the memories, and she will do the rest. So you do. You spend the summer of 1930 writing in pencil on lined tablets, filling page after page with stories about Pa and Ma and your sisters, about the wolves and the bears and the long winter when you nearly starved. You write about the grasshoppers that ate the crops and the blizzards that lasted for months and the time Pa almost died in a snowstorm. You write it all down, 74,000 words, and you hand it to Rose. She types it, she edits it, she sends it to publishers, and every single one rejects it. Too flat, they say. Too much like a list of events. No dramatic structure, no arc, no heart. The manuscript that was supposed to save both of you dies in a pile of rejection letters. You're devastated. You thought maybe, just maybe, your life was worth something to someone besides you. But the publishers have spoken. Your memories are not interesting. Your voice is not good enough. You're just another old woman with stories no one wants to hear. Rose is not devastated. Rose is thinking. She has been a professional writer for 15 years. She has ghostwritten biographies. She has written novels. She knows how to take raw material and turn it into something people will pay for. And she knows that your manuscript is not bad. It is just wrong. It is written for adults, and adults do not want to read about poverty and hardship and babies dying. But children love adventure. Children love stories about wolves and bears and surviving in the wilderness. She does not tell you what she's planning. She just takes your manuscript and runs it through her typewriter one more time. She cuts it down. She focuses on the stories about Pa. She makes it into a picture book. She sends it to Knopf without telling you. And then the letter arrives. The letter that says Knopf loves it. The letter that says they want more. The letter that changes everything. You look at Rose and you see the same desperation you feel. You see a woman who has lost everything and is clawing her way back. You see a woman who needs this book to succeed as much as you do. And you see a woman who is willing to do whatever it takes to make that happen, even if it means rewriting your life without asking. You do not argue. You do not fight. You just pick up your pencil and start writing. Because you need the money. Because you need to survive. And because, deep down, you know that Rose is better at this than you are. She is a professional. She knows how to make words sing. And if she has to rewrite your life to make it work, then that is what will happen. The collaboration begins. The secret begins. And neither of you knows that this decision will haunt American literature for the next 90 years. You are holding a rejection letter, and it feels heavier than the tablet full of memories you spent 5 months writing. It is late 1930, and Pioneer Girl has been turned down by every publisher Rose sent it to. Not just rejected, dismissed. One editor wrote that it didn't warm me enough. Another said there was no crescendo. They all said the same thing in different ways. Your life is not interesting enough to sell. You sit at the kitchen table and stare at the pages you wrote. 74,000 words, 5 months of work, every memory you could drag out of your 63-year-old brain, written in pencil on cheap-line tablets because you could not afford better. You wrote about the big woods and the prairie and the claim shanty and Dakota Territory. You wrote about the grasshoppers and the blizzards and the year the wheat failed. You wrote about the day Almanzo fell in the yard, paralyzed from diphtheria, and you had to drag him inside because he could not walk. You wrote it all. You wrote the truth. And the truth, apparently, is not good enough. Rose sits across from you, reading through the manuscript one more time. She's not surprised by the rejections. She knew it was a long shot. She's been writing professionally for 15 years, and she knows what publishers want. They want drama. They want structure. They want a story that builds and builds until the reader cannot put it down. What you wrote was a memoir, a chronicle, a list of events that happened in the order they happened. It was honest. It was accurate. It was boring. But Rose does not say that. She just keeps reading, and you watch her face, trying to figure out what she's thinking. Rose has always been hard to read. Even as a child, she kept her thoughts locked away, and now, at 43, she has perfected the art of hiding what she feels. She's a professional writer, a world traveller, a woman who has interviewed presidents and lived in foreign countries and seen things you cannot even imagine. And now she's back in Missouri, broke and desperate, trying to figure out how to make money from her mother's failed manuscript. She finally looks up. She says the problem is not the stories. The stories are good. The problem is the way you told them. You wrote them like a newspaper article, like one of your columns for the Missouri Ruralist. You wrote them like someone who is reporting facts, not someone who is living an adventure. The readers do not want facts. They want to feel like they are there, in the big woods, standing next to Pa when the panther screams in the night. They want to taste the johnny cake and smell the wood smoke and feel the cold of the winter blizzard. You tell her you do not know how to write like that. You never learned. You went to school in one-room schoolhouses where the teacher was barely older than you were. You taught yourself to read and write, and you did the best you could. You're not a professional writer like Rose. You're just a farm wife who spent her life trying to survive. Rose says she knows, and that is why she's going to help you. She's going to take your manuscript and fix it. She's going to turn it into something publishers will want. But first, she needs to figure out what kind of book it should be. She spends the next few weeks thinking. She reads through Pioneer Girl again and again, looking for the heart of the story, the part that will make people care. And then, one day, she has an idea. She does not need to sell the whole manuscript. She just needs to sell part of it. She needs to take the best stories, the ones about Pa and the big woods, and turn them into a children's book. Not a memoir for adults, not an autobiography, a picture book for children, full of adventure and danger, and the kind of stories kids love. She does not tell you this plan. She just sits down at her typewriter and starts cutting. She takes your 74,000 words and boils them down to 21 pages. She focuses on the stories about the wolf and the bear and the long winter nights. She cuts out the parts about poverty and death and failure. She makes it simple. She makes it exciting. She makes it into something a child would want to read. And then she sends it to Knopf, under your name, without telling you. You find out weeks later when the letter arrives. You're angry. You're confused. You're also, despite yourself, hopeful. Because Knopf wants it. They actually want it. They want 15,000 more words and they are willing to pay for it. Rose hands you a tablet and tells you to start writing. Write about the big woods, she says. Write about the log cabin and the smokehouse and the way Pa played the fiddle. Write about the food and the clothes and the chores. Write about what it felt like to be a little girl in the wilderness. Write it all down, and she will turn it into a book. You do not argue. You do not have the energy to argue. You just pick up your pencil and start writing. And as you write, you realize that Rose has done something you could never do. She has taken your memories, your boring, factual memories, and she has found the magic in them. She has found the part that people will love. But she has also taken control. She has made decisions about your life without asking. She has rewritten your story without permission. And as you write, you wonder, when this book is published, whose voice will the readers hear? Yours or hers? You do not ask the question out loud, you just keep writing, because you need the money, because you need to survive, and because deep down, you know the answer. The voice they will hear is both of yours. The story they will love is the one you created together, the one where your memories meet her skill, where your truth meets her talent. The collaboration has begun. The secret has been born. And the book that will change everything is taking shape on the page, one pencil stroke at a time. You're sitting at the kitchen table with a pencil in your hand, and every word you write feels like it belongs to someone else. It is March 1931, and Knopf wants 15,000 more words about your childhood in the big woods. They want stories about Pa and Ma, about your sisters Mary and Carrie, about the log cabin and the long winter nights. They want you to make readers feel like they are there, living in the wilderness, surviving on venison and cornmeal and whatever Pa could hunt or trap. You write. You fill page after page with memories. You describe the log cabin with its one room and dirt floor. You write about the garden where Ma grew turnips and carrots. You write about the attic where you and Mary slept, where the snow blew in through the cracks and you could see your breath in the morning. You write about the smokehouse and the cheese press, and the way Pa would come home from hunting with a deer slung over his shoulder. You write it all in pencil on lined tablets, and then you hand the pages to Rose, and Rose tears it apart. She sits at her typewriter with your pages spread around her, and she rewrites every single sentence. She does not just type what you wrote, she changes it. She adds details you never mentioned. She removes details you thought were important. She rearranges paragraphs. She rewrites dialogue. She turns your simple, straightforward memories into something that sounds like literature. You watch her work, and you feel something uncomfortable growing in your chest. It is not quite anger. It is not quite resentment. It is something closer to humiliation. The feeling of being told that your best is not good enough, that your voice needs to be fixed before anyone will want to hear it. Rose does not ask if you mind. She just keeps typing, her fingers flying across the keys, cigarette smoke curling up from the ashtray beside her. She's in her element now, doing what she has done for 15 years as a professional writer. She's taking raw material and shaping it into something that will sell. And your memories, your life, your childhood, those are just raw material to her. She finishes a section and hands it back to you. You read it, and you barely recognize it. The bones are there, the basic facts, but everything else has changed. The words are different, the rhythm is different, even the way Pa talks is different. Rose has given him a voice that sounds warmer, more folksy, more like what people expect a frontier father to sound like. But it is not how Pa actually talked. Pa was quiet. Pa was careful with his words. Pa did not make speeches about the wilderness. You tell Rose this. You say the dialogue is wrong. She looks at you with the patient expression of someone explaining something to a child, and she says that it does not matter if it is exactly right. What matters is that it sounds right to the readers. What matters is that it makes them feel something. Nobody wants to read a history textbook. They want to read a story. You argue. You say these are your memories, your life, your family. You were there. You know how Pa talked. You know what the cabin looked like. You know what it felt like to be 5 years old in the big woods. Rose says she knows, but she also knows what publishers want. She knows what readers want, and what they want is not a transcript of your childhood. They want a story that makes them cry and laugh and feel like they are living in a simpler, better time. They want the pioneer life, but without the dirt and the hunger and the constant fear of death. They want the version that makes them nostalgic for something they never experienced. You stare at the typed pages in your hand, and you realize that Rose is not just editing your work. She is erasing you and replacing you with a version she created. The Laura Ingalls Wilder that readers will meet in this book is not you. It is Rose's idea of you. It is the you that sells. But you need the money. Almanzo can barely walk. The farm is failing. The bills are piling up. So you swallow your pride, and you nod, and you go back to your tablet to write more memories that Rose will rewrite into something you barely recognize. The collaboration is no longer a partnership. It is a takeover, and you are letting it happen because you have no other choice. Rose lights another cigarette and feeds a fresh sheet of paper into her typewriter. She asks what happened the day the bear came to the cabin. You start to tell her, and she's already typing, already turning your words into something else, something better, something that is no longer entirely yours. And you sit there, watching her work, wondering if anyone will ever know the truth, wondering if it even matters anymore. You're standing in the doorway, watching Rose work, and you're starting to understand that your daughter knows things about writing that you will never learn. It is late spring 1931, and the manuscript for Little House in the Big Woods is taking shape. Rose has been working on it for weeks, typing and retyping, editing and re-editing, until every sentence sounds exactly the way she wants it to sound. She works late into the night, the clack of her typewriter echoing through the farmhouse. And sometimes you wake up at 3 in the morning and hear her still working, still perfecting, still trying to make your memories into something worth publishing. You watch her, and you see the years of professional experience that separate you from her. Rose has written for the Saturday Evening Post, for Cosmopolitan, for Harper's. She has ghostwritten biographies of Henry Ford and Herbert Hoover. She has travelled through Europe and the Middle East, writing articles about everything she saw. She has interviewed famous people, lived in foreign countries, learned how to make words do exactly what she wants them to do. And you wrote farm columns for the Missouri Ruralist. You wrote about chickens and butter and how to stretch $1 during hard times. You never learned the tricks Rose knows, the subtle techniques that make readers keep turning pages. You never learned how to build tension, how to create suspense, how to make a simple scene feel like the most important moment in the world. Rose learned all of that, and now she is using every single technique she knows to turn your memories into a book that will sell. She explains some of it to you as she works. She tells you about the importance of sensory details, of making readers see and smell and taste the world you're describing. She tells you about pacing, about how to know when to slow down and linger on a moment and when to speed up and rush through events. She tells you about dialogue, about how people do not actually talk the way they talk in real life. How written dialogue has to be cleaner and sharper and more purposeful than the real speech. You listen, and you learn, and you also feel yourself disappearing. because every technique Rose teaches you, every trick she uses, pushes your actual memories further into the background. The book is no longer about what really happened. It is about what makes a good story. And sometimes those two things are not the same. Rose rewrites the story about the time you and Mary went to town with Ma. In your version, it was a simple trip. You went to the store, you got supplies, you came home. Nothing dramatic happened. But in Rose's version, it becomes an adventure. She adds details you never mentioned. She makes the town feel bigger, more exciting, more dangerous. She gives you thoughts and feelings you do not remember having. She turns a boring errand into a scene that builds tension and keeps readers engaged. You read it, and you have to admit it is better than what you wrote. It is more interesting. It is more vivid. It makes you want to keep reading. But it also did not happen that way. And you wonder if that matters. Rose says it does not. She says all writers do this. She says memory is unreliable anyway, that you cannot possibly remember every detail from when you were 5 years old. So what is the harm in filling in the gaps with details that make the story work better? She says the emotional truth is more important than the factual truth. She says readers do not care if you wore a blue dress or a brown dress on that particular day. They care about how you felt. They care about the experience of being a child in the wilderness. You want to argue. You want to say that the facts do matter, that this is your life, not a novel Rose invented. But you also know she is right. You cannot remember every detail. You've been guessing at some of it yourself, filling in the gaps with what seems reasonable, with what probably happened. So maybe Rose filling in the gaps is not so different. Maybe it is just more professional. But then Rose does something that makes you uncomfortable. She adds a scene that never happened at all. She writes about a time when Pa took you into the woods and taught you about the trees and the animals. It is a beautiful scene. It is touching. It makes Pa seem like a wise, patient father teaching his daughter about the natural world. It is exactly the kind of scene that readers will love. But it never happened. Pa never did that. Pa was too busy working, too busy hunting and trapping and trying to keep the family fed. He did not have time for nature walks and gentle lessons. He loved you, but he showed it by providing for you, not by giving you educational tours of the forest. You tell Rose this. You say she cannot just invent scenes that never happened. She looks at you with that patient expression again, and she says it does not matter. She says the scene is emotionally true, even if it is not factually true. She says it captures who Pa was, what kind of father he was, even if this specific moment never occurred. She says readers will not know the difference, and they will love Pa because of it. You stare at the typed page, and you realize something that makes your stomach hurt. Rose is not just editing your memories. She is creating a new version of your family, a version that is more lovable, more admirable, more perfect than the real family you grew up with. She is turning your messy, complicated, sometimes harsh childhood into a nostalgic fairy tale. And she is doing it because that is what sells. You think about saying no. You think about demanding that she remove the scene, that she stick to what actually happened. But then you remember the rejection letters. You remember the publishers saying your manuscript was too flat, too factual, no crescendo. You remember that this is your last chance to make money from your memories, and if you fight Rose on every change, the book will never get published. So you let it go. You let Rose keep the invented scene. You let her create a version of Pa that is warmer and wiser than the real Pa ever was. You let her turn your childhood into something it was not. And you tell yourself it does not matter. You tell yourself that the book is just a book, that it is not supposed to be a historical document. You tell yourself that a little fiction mixed with the facts is acceptable if it makes people happy. But late at night, when you lie in bed and think about what you've agreed to, you wonder if you are selling something more important than your memories. You wonder if you are selling the truth. And you wonder if, years from now, people will read these books and think they know you, think they know your family, when really all they know is the version Rose created. The typewriter clacks in the next room. Rose is still working, still perfecting, still turning your life into art. And you lie there in the dark, listening, knowing that the woman writing those pages knows more about storytelling than you ever will. Knowing that she is better at this than you are. knowing that without her, your memories would have died in a stack of rejection letters, knowing that the price of success is letting someone else tell your story. You are holding a check for $500, and it feels like a miracle. It is late 1931, and Little House in the Big Woods has been accepted for publication. Harper and Brothers, not Knopf, because Rose switched publishers, wants to print your book. They believe it will sell. They are willing to pay you for it. $500 as an advance against royalties, which is more money than you have seen in years. You stare at the check, and your hands are shaking. $500 will pay the mortgage. $500 will buy groceries for months. $500 means you and Almanzo can survive a little longer, can hold on to the farm, can stop lying awake at night wondering how you will make it through the winter. Rose is smiling. She's proud of what you accomplished together, proud that her editing and your memories combined into something a publisher wanted. She's already talking about the next book, about how you should start writing about the Prairie years, about the little house on the Kansas prairie where you lived when you were 4 and 5 years old. You nod, but you're not really listening. You're still staring at the check, still trying to process that someone actually wants to pay you for your memories. After all the rejection letters, after all the doubt, after all the times you thought your life was not interesting enough to matter to anyone, here is proof that you were wrong. Here is proof that your childhood, your family, your experiences have value. But there is a small voice in the back of your mind asking a question you do not want to answer. How much of this check belongs to Rose? You wrote the memories. You filled the tablets with pencil scratches about the big woods and the log cabin and Pa playing the fiddle. But Rose rewrote every word. Rose added scenes. Rose changed dialogue. Rose turned your flat, factual manuscript into something that glowed with warmth and nostalgia. Without Rose, this check would not exist. Without Rose, your manuscript would still be sitting in a drawer, gathering dust. So how much of this success is yours, and how much is hers? Rose does not ask for credit. She does not ask for money. She does not suggest that her name should appear on the book alongside yours. She lets you have the check, lets you have the glory, lets you be the author. But you both know the truth. You both know that the book readers will hold in their hands is as much Rose's creation as it is yours. And you do not know how to feel about that. You are grateful. Of course you are grateful. Rose saved you. She took your failed manuscript and turned it into something that will pay your bills and maybe, if you are lucky, launch a career you never imagined having at 64 years old. She did not have to do that. She could have focused on her own writing, her own career. But instead she spent months working on your book, perfecting every sentence, fighting with editors, pushing until they said yes. But you're also uncomfortable, because the world will think these words are yours. The world will think you wrote this beautiful, polished prose, these perfect scenes, this nostalgic portrait of pioneer life, and you did not. Not really. You provided the raw material, but Rose shaped it into art. And nobody will ever know that except you and her. Rose says it does not matter. She says the book is yours because the memories are yours. She says she was just the editor, just the person who helped you tell your story, the way it deserved to be told. She says every writer has editors, and this is no different. But it feels different, because Rose did not just edit. She rewrote, she invented, she created scenes that never happened and dialogue that was never spoken. She turned your real, messy, complicated childhood into a fairy tale, and now the world will believe the fairy tale is the truth. You fold the check and put it in your pocket. You tell Rose thank you. You tell her you could not have done this without her, and you mean it. But you also know that something has been lost in the process. The real Laura Ingalls Wilder, the woman who survived blizzards and grasshoppers and the death of a baby son, the woman who worked herself to exhaustion just to keep the farm running, the woman who was not always cheerful and patient and wise, that woman has been erased. And in her place is the Laura that Rose created, the Laura that readers will fall in love with, the Laura that never really existed. You wonder if anyone will ever want to know the real you, or if the fairy tale version is all that matters now. The book will be published in 1932. It will be a success. Children will love it. Parents will read it aloud at bedtime. Teachers will assign it in schools. And a whole generation will grow up thinking they know Laura Ingalls Wilder, thinking they understand what pioneer life was like, thinking they have experienced something real and true and historical, and you will let them believe it. Because the alternative is admitting that the book is as much fiction as fact, and nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to know that their beloved childhood stories are built on lies and revisions and scenes invented by a desperate daughter trying to save her desperate mother. So you will keep the secret. You will smile for the cameras and sign the autographs and answer the letters from children who think you are the Laura in the books. You will play the part Rose created for you, and you will never tell anyone that the voice they love is not entirely yours. Rose goes back to her typewriter. She's already planning the next book, already thinking about how to turn your memories of the Kansas Prairie into another heartwarming story. And you sit at the kitchen table with a check in your pocket, feeling both triumphant and hollow. You won. You survived. You sold your memories and saved your farm. But the cost was higher than you expected. The cost was the truth. And you will spend the rest of your life wondering if it was worth it. You're reading a review of your book in the New York Times, and you do not recognize the person they are talking about. It is 1932, and Little House in the Big Woods has been published for 3 months. The reviews are glowing, critics love it, parents are buying it for their children, libraries are ordering copies. The Book of the Month Club called it a genuine addition to American literature, and you sit in your farmhouse in Missouri reading these reviews, feeling like they are describing a stranger. The reviewers praise your warm, vivid prose. They admire your gift for bringing the pioneer experience to life. They say you have captured the essence of childhood with remarkable clarity and tenderness. They use words like lyrical and evocative and beautifully crafted. And every single one of those words makes you feel like a fraud. Because you know the truth. You know that the warm, vivid prose was Rose's. You know that the lyrical quality came from Rose's typewriter, not your pencil. You know that the scenes the reviewers are praising most, the ones that feel most alive, most perfectly constructed, are the ones Rose rewrote the most heavily, or invented entirely. But nobody knows that except you and Rose. And Rose is not telling anyone. You should feel proud. You should feel vindicated. After all those years of writing farm columns that nobody paid attention to, after all those rejection letters, after a lifetime of being invisible, you are finally being noticed. People are reading your name. Children are falling asleep listening to your stories. You're becoming something you never imagined, a real author. But the pride is contaminated by guilt. Every time someone compliments your writing, you think about Rose sitting at her typewriter, rewriting your sentences until they sang. Every time someone says they love the way you described a scene, you wonder if that was one of the scenes Rose invented. Every time a letter arrives from a child saying they feel like they know you, you think about how they actually know Rose's version of you, not the real person who survived things too ugly to put in a children's book. The book is selling well, not spectacularly, not enough to make you rich, but well enough that Harper wants another one. They want you to write about the Prairie years, about Kansas, about the little house on the open grassland where you lived when you were 4 and 5. They are willing to pay another advance. They believe you have more stories worth telling, and Rose is already planning it. She sits down with you at the kitchen table and asks you to remember everything about Kansas. Tell me about the house, she says. Tell me about the creek and the Indians and the wolves. Tell me about the day you got malaria and almost died. Tell me about Pa building the house and digging the well and trying to prove up on the claim before the government took it back. You start talking, and Rose starts taking notes. She is all business now, professional and focused. She knows what worked in the first book, and she knows what will work in the second. She knows readers want more of the same, more Pa, more pioneer life, more cozy domesticity mixed with wilderness danger. She knows they do not want to hear about the real Kansas, the place where you lived illegally on Osage land, where Pa broke the law and nearly got the family killed, where the government eventually forced you to leave because white settlers were not supposed to be there yet. Rose tells you to focus on the good parts. Focus on the house and the Christmas and the way Ma kept the family going. Do not dwell on the illegal settlement. Do not make Pa look bad. Do not mention that you left Kansas because you were trespassing on Indian territory and the government was removing white squatters. Just say the family decided to move and leave it at that. You hesitate. You say it feels dishonest to leave out the truth. Rose gives you a look that says you are being naive. She reminds you that this is a children's book, not a history textbook. She reminds you that the first book sold because it made readers feel good, made them nostalgic for a simpler time, made them believe that pioneer life was hard but noble. If you start admitting that Pa broke laws and lived on stolen land and had to flee before the soldiers came, readers will not feel good anymore. They will feel uncomfortable, and uncomfortable readers do not buy books, so you swallow the truth, just like you did with the first book. You pick up your pencil and start writing the sanitized version, the version where Pa is a hero instead of a criminal, where the family left Kansas because they wanted to instead of because they had no choice, where the pioneer experience is an adventure instead of a series of illegal, desperate gambles. Rose takes your pages and rewrites them. She makes the little house sound cozier than it was. She makes the prairie sound more beautiful and less terrifying. She invents scenes of Pa playing the fiddle and Ma baking bread, scenes that maybe happened but not the way Rose writes them, not with that golden glow of perfection. And you let her do it. Because the first book was a success. And success means doing the same thing again. Success means giving readers what they want, not what actually happened. Success means turning your life into a product that can be packaged and sold and consumed without leaving a bitter aftertaste. You read through Rose's revisions and they are beautiful. They are better than anything you could have written. They make you want to cry. They are so perfect, so touching, so full of warmth and love and the kind of family life everyone wishes they had. But they are not true, not completely. And you wonder how many lies you can tell before you forget what the truth was. The reviews for the second book will be just as good as the first, maybe better, and you will read them and feel the same mixture of pride and shame, triumph and fraud. You will cash the checks and pay the bills and be grateful for the success. But late at night, when the house is quiet and Rose is asleep, and you lie in bed staring at the ceiling, you will remember the real Kansas. You will remember the fear when the Indians came close to the house. You will remember the shame when Pa had to admit you were leaving because the government was forcing you out. You will remember the truth that readers will never know because it does not fit the story Rose is building. And you will wonder if anyone will ever care about the real Laura Ingalls Wilder, or if the only version that matters is the one Rose created. You are sitting across from Rose, arguing about whether you were really scared of Indians, and you realize this is not about Indians at all. It is 1933, and you are working on Little House on the Prairie, the book about Kansas. Rose has been rewriting your draft for weeks, and now you're going through it together, and you have hit a wall. The wall is built out of your actual memories crashing into Rose's idea of what makes a good story. You wrote about the Indians who lived near your claim. You wrote about how terrified you were when they came to the house, how you hid behind Ma's skirts, how you could not sleep at night because you thought they were going to kill you. You were 4 years old and you were scared. That is the truth. That is what you remember. But Rose has changed it. In her version, you're curious about the Indians, fascinated by them, watching them with wonder instead of terror. She has made you into a brave, open-minded child who sees the Indians as interesting neighbours instead of threats. She has turned your fear into anthropological curiosity. You tell her that is not how it was. You were scared. Ma was scared. Everyone was scared except Pa, and even Pa kept his gun loaded by the door just in case. You were not some enlightened child marvelling at Native American culture. You were a terrified little girl who thought you were going to die. Rose lights a cigarette and explains, with the patience of someone talking to a stubborn student, that your version is problematic. She says readers in 1933 do not want to read about a child being terrified of Indians. It makes the pioneers look like bigots. It makes your family look racist. And besides, she says, fear is boring. Fear is what everyone expects. What is interesting is a child who sees past the fear, who recognizes the humanity in people who look different. You say that might be interesting, but it is not true. And this is supposed to be a true story. These are your memories. This is your life. Rose says these are not really your memories. You were 4 years old. You cannot possibly remember everything accurately. Memory is unreliable. So what Rose is doing is filling in the gaps with what makes sense emotionally, with what serves the larger truth of who you were as a person. You stare at her. You say the larger truth is that you were scared. Rose says the larger truth is that you grew up to be a woman who respected all people. So clearly you were not as racist as a typical pioneer child, which means your childhood self must have had some curiosity mixed in with the fear. And there it is. Rose is not writing about the real you. She's writing about the you she thinks you should have been. She's creating a Laura who fits her own political views, her own ideas about race and progress and the American spirit. She is turning your messy, complicated, sometimes ugly childhood into a story with clear moral lessons and easy answers. You argue for an hour. You insist on keeping at least some of the fear in the story. Rose insists on adding the curiosity. Eventually you compromise, but the compromise feels more like surrender. The final version will have both fear and fascination, but Rose's curiosity will get more space, more emphasis, more weight. The Laura in the book will be braver and more progressive than the real Laura ever was. And this is when you start to see the pattern. This is not the first time Rose has changed your memories to fit her vision. She did it with Pa in the first book, making him wiser and warmer than he really was. She did it with Ma, turning her into a perfect pioneer mother instead of the exhausted, frightened woman who sometimes snapped at her children because she was too tired to be patient. She did it with your sisters, smoothing out their rough edges, making them into idealized versions of real people. Rose is not documenting your life. She's inventing a mythology. She's creating a perfect pioneer family that never existed, a wholesome American childhood that is more fantasy than fact. And she's using your memories as the foundation, but the building she's constructing on top of them is all hers. You ask her why she's doing this. Why not just tell the truth? Why make everything prettier and simpler and more moral than it really was? Rose looks at you like you're being deliberately obtuse. She says the truth does not sell. The truth is that pioneer life was brutal and desperate and full of bad decisions made by people who were too poor and too stubborn to admit defeat. The truth is that your family broke laws and trespassed on Indian land and lived in constant fear of disease and starvation and violence. The truth is ugly and complicated, and nobody wants to read it to their children at bedtime. What sells, Rose says, is the myth. What sells is the idea that America was built by brave, noble families who worked hard and loved each other and carved civilization out of the wilderness through sheer determination. What sells is nostalgia for a past that never existed but that everyone wishes had. What sells is making readers feel good about being American. And that is what Rose is building. She's building the myth of the American frontier, one book at a time, using your life as the raw material. She's turning you into an icon, a symbol, a representation of something larger than yourself. And the cost of that transformation is the truth. You think about refusing. You think about demanding that she stick to the facts, that she stop inventing and start documenting. But then you remember the bills. You remember that the farm is still struggling. You remember that Almanzo is 66 years old and can barely walk and cannot work the land the way he used to. You remember that these books are the only income you have that is keeping you afloat. So you agree to the compromise. You let Rose add the curiosity and smooth out the racism and turn your terrified 4-year-old self into someone braver than you were. You let her build her myth. But you also start keeping notes, not for another book, just for yourself. You write down what really happened, the parts Rose cut out or changed. You write down Pa's real words, the things he said that were not folksy or wise, just practical and sometimes harsh. You write down Ma's real moods, the days when she cried from exhaustion or snapped at you for no reason. You write down the truth and you hide it in a drawer, because someday, maybe, someone will want to know what really happened. Someday someone will care about the real Laura Ingalls Wilder, not the symbol Rose is creating. And when that day comes, you will have the evidence. You will have proof that you were real, that your life was more complicated than the myth, that the woman who survived the prairie was harder and meaner and more desperate than the woman in the books. But that day is not today. Today you sign off on Rose's revisions and you watch her feed another page into her typewriter, and you wonder how many versions of yourself you will have to create before you are allowed to rest. You are holding a royalty check for $1,200, and you finally understand what you have sold. It is late 1933, and Little House in the Big Woods has been out for over a year. The royalties are coming in steadily. The book is selling better than anyone expected, especially for a children's book by an unknown author. Harper wants a third book, then a fourth. They believe you have a whole series in you. They are talking about building a brand around the Little House name. $1,200 is more money than you have ever had at one time in your entire life. It is more than a year's income from the farm. It is enough to pay off debts, fix the roof, maybe even hire someone to help Almanzo with the heavy work. It is security. It is survival. It is proof that you made the right choice when you let Rose rewrite your memories. But it is also a chain, because now you cannot stop. Now you have to keep writing, keep producing more memories, keep feeding the machine that turns your life into saleable stories. Harper wants more books. Readers want more books. Your bank account needs more books. And Rose is ready to keep editing, keep rewriting, keep building the mythology. You sit down with Rose to plan the next book. She wants you to write about Plum Creek, Minnesota, where you lived when you were 7 to 9 years old. Write about the dugout house, she says. Write about the grasshoppers that ate everything. Write about Mary going blind. Write about the creek and the swimming hole and the time you and Mary went to town. You hesitate at that last one. You remember going to town and you remember what happened there. You remember the other children making fun of your poverty, laughing at your shabby clothes, refusing to play with you because you lived in a dugout like animals. You remember the shame that burned in your chest, the feeling of being less than human because you were poor. You remember going home and crying and Ma trying to comfort you but not having the words to make it better. Rose says that is perfect. Write that, she says. That is real emotion. That is what readers will connect with. But when you write it, and Rose rewrites it, the shame becomes something else. Rose turns it into a lesson about resilience. She makes you bounce back from the bullying, makes you rise above it, makes you realize that true worth comes from character, not clothes. She gives you thoughts and insights that an 8-year-old girl wallowing in shame would never have had. She turns your pain into a moral lesson, and the worst part is, it works. When you read Rose's version, you cry. It is beautiful. It is touching. It is exactly the kind of scene that will make readers love you and admire you and want to be like you. It is a perfect piece of writing, but it is not true. The real you did not bounce back. The real you carried that shame for years. The real you never forgot what it felt like to be the poorest child in town, to be mocked for living in a hole in the ground, to know that other people thought you were trash. Rose says it does not matter. She says the emotional arc matters more than the factual details. She says readers do not want to read about a child who stays damaged by bullying. They want to read about a child who overcomes it. They want hope, not despair. You understand what she means. You understand that books, especially children's books, need to be uplifting. You understand that nobody wants to buy a depressing story about poverty and shame and trauma that never heals. You understand all of that. But you also understand that Rose is not just making your stories more hopeful. She's erasing the real cost of poverty. She's pretending that pioneer hardship built character instead of breaking people. She's selling a lie about the American frontier, a lie that says suffering was noble and poverty was just a temporary setback on the road to success. The real frontier was full of people who did not overcome their hardships. It was full of people who were broken by the blizzards and the grasshoppers and the constant grinding poverty. It was full of families who gave up and went back east. It was full of children who died, men who drank themselves to death, women who went insane from isolation and overwork. Your own family almost fell apart multiple times. Your baby brother died. Your husband was left partially paralyzed. You lost farm after farm, failed over and over, and barely survived. But none of that will be in the books. The books will show a family that always bounces back, that always finds hope, that always makes it through. The books will make pioneer life look hard but ultimately rewarding, as if suffering is just part of a story arc that ends with triumph, and readers will believe it. They will read these books and think they understand what pioneer life was like. They will romanticize the hardship. They will wish they could have lived through those adventurous times. They will have no idea that the real experience was less adventure and more slow-motion disaster. You cash the check, you pay the bills, you sit down with your pencil and write about Plum Creek, and you let Rose rewrite it into something beautiful and false. You do this because you need the money, because you have no other options. Because the alternative is admitting that you sold your truth for survival, and you cannot afford to admit that yet. The machine keeps running. You write memories. Rose rewrites them into myths. Harper publishes them. Readers buy them. Money comes in. And the real Laura Ingalls Wilder, the woman who was scared and petty and damaged and bitter, the woman who carried her wounds forever, disappears a little more with each book. Rose tells you that you are doing important work. She says these books will matter. She says they will teach children about American history and frontier values. She says they will inspire generations. And she is right. They will. But what they will teach is a fiction. What they will inspire is nostalgia for something that never existed. And you, the real woman who lived through the real hardship, will become a ghost in your own story. You're reading a letter from a child in Ohio, and every word makes you feel like a liar. It is 1935, and you've published 3 Little House books. Children across America are reading them, loving them, writing you letters that arrive in stacks at Rocky Ridge Farm. They write to tell you that you are their favourite author, that they wish they could have lived in the big woods or on the prairie, that they want to be just like you when they grow up. This letter is from a girl named Betty. She is 9 years old, and she has read Little House in the Big Woods 7 times. She says you are the bravest person she knows. She says when she grows up she wants to be a pioneer just like you were, living in the wilderness with her family, making maple syrup and playing in the woods and having adventures every day. You fold the letter and set it down and you feel sick. Betty has no idea what pioneer life was actually like. She thinks it was an adventure because that is what Rose made it sound like in the books. She does not know about the hunger or the cold or the constant terror of disease. She does not know that your baby brother died before he was a month old. She does not know that your husband was left partially paralysed by diphtheria. She does not know that you lost farm after farm, failed over and over, and spent most of your childhood one disaster away from starvation. Betty read a fairy tale and thinks it is history, and you let her believe it because Rose convinced you that fairy tales sell better than truth. There are dozens of letters like this. Children writing to say they want to be pioneers. Parents writing to say your books have taught their children about hard work and family values. Teachers writing to say they are using the books in their classrooms to teach about American history. American history, they think they are learning history, and what they are learning is a sanitized, romanticized, carefully edited version of events that leaves out everything ugly and uncomfortable and true. Rose reads some of the letters and smiles. She says this is exactly what you hoped for. The books are reaching people, they are making a difference, they are teaching children about the frontier experience and the pioneer spirit that built America. But you wonder what they are really teaching. They are teaching that poverty is picturesque. They are teaching that suffering builds character. They are teaching that if you work hard and stay optimistic, everything will turn out fine. They are teaching lies. The real frontier was not about adventure. It was about desperation. It was about people who were too poor to live in civilization, so they moved west where land was cheap or free, and they tried to survive on it. Most of them failed. Many of them died. The ones who made it through were not heroes. They were just stubborn or lucky or both. But the books do not say that. The books make it sound like your family chose the frontier life, like Pa was some kind of adventurer seeking freedom instead of a failed farmer running from debt. The books make it sound like the hardships were temporary setbacks instead of a grinding, relentless struggle that never really ended. You write back to Betty. You thank her for her letter. You tell her you are glad she enjoyed the books, but you do not tell her the truth. You do not tell her that pioneer life was not an adventure, that you would not wish it on anyone, that if she could actually experience what you went through, she would be begging to go back to her comfortable house in Ohio within a week. You do not tell her because Rose has made you understand that children need hope, not truth. They need to believe that hardship can be overcome, that families can stick together through anything, that the past was simpler and better than the present. They need the myth. But what happens when the myth becomes more real than the reality? What happens when a whole generation grows up believing a lie about their own history? What happens when people think they understand the frontier because they read your books, when really all they understand is the story Rose constructed? You put Betty's letter in a drawer with all the others. You will save them because they are proof that the books matter to people, that your words, or Rose's words, or the strange hybrid of both, have touched lives and changed minds. But they are also proof that you have become complicit in a deception. Every letter is evidence that the lie is working, that the myth is spreading, that the real Laura Ingalls Wilder is disappearing under the weight of the character Rose created. Rose is already planning the next book. She wants you to write about the year Mary went blind, about the grasshopper plague, about the hard winter when you almost starved. She wants more drama, more stakes, more of the story that will keep readers coming back for the next installment. And you will give it to her. You will write about Mary's blindness, and Rose will make it into a tragic but ultimately uplifting story about family resilience. You will write about the grasshoppers, and Rose will turn them into an exciting natural disaster instead of the economic catastrophe that almost destroyed you. You will write about the hard winter, and Rose will emphasize the cozy family moments instead of the constant fear that you might not survive until spring. You will keep feeding the machine. You will keep providing the memories. Rose will keep rewriting them into myths. And children like Betty will keep reading the books and thinking they understand something true about America, when really all they understand is a carefully constructed fantasy. The letters keep coming. Every day, more children writing to tell you how much they love the books, how much they wish they could be like you, how much they admire the pioneering spirit. And every day, you feel a little more like a fraud, because the person they admire does not exist. The Laura in the books is braver than you were, kinder than you were, more optimistic than you ever managed to be. She is the Laura you might have been if life had been gentler, if poverty had not left scars, if failure had not taught you to expect the worst. But that Laura is fiction, and you are the real one, sitting in a farmhouse in Missouri, reading letters from children who will never know the difference. You're screaming at Rose about your sister's blindness, and you realize you have never been this angry in your entire life. It is 1936, and you're working on the Banks of Plum Creek, the book that will include the scarlet fever epidemic that left Mary blind. You have written the chapter about Mary getting sick, about the days of fever and terror, about the moment when you realized your sister would never see again. You wrote it as honestly as you could, including the parts that still hurt to remember. The guilt you felt for not getting sick yourself, the resentment you sometimes felt toward Mary afterward, the way Mary's blindness changed everything about your family's future. Rose has rewritten it, and she has removed all of the complicated emotions and replaced them with saintly acceptance and noble suffering. In Rose's version, you are heartbroken for Mary but never resentful. You're supportive and kind and endlessly patient with your blind sister. You never feel guilty for being the one who can still see. You never feel angry at the unfairness of it. You're a perfect little sister, and Mary is a perfect victim who faces her disability with courage and grace. It is a beautiful piece of writing. It will make readers cry. It is also a complete betrayal of what actually happened. You tell Rose that she cannot do this. You tell her that Mary's blindness was messy and complicated, and brought out the worst in everyone, not just the best. You tell her that you were not a perfect sister, that sometimes you hated having to help Mary with everything, that sometimes you wished she would just admit she was helpless instead of pretending she could still do things she clearly could not. Rose stares at you like you have just confessed to murder. She says you cannot put that in a children's book. She says readers will hate you if you admit you are sometimes resentful of your blind sister. She says the whole point of the scene is to show family loyalty and love conquering adversity. You say the point should be to tell the truth. Rose says the truth does not sell. You say you do not care about selling if it means lying about Mary. Rose says you cared about selling when you cashed the royalty checks. The fight escalates. You bring up every change Rose has made that you disagreed with, every scene she invented, every emotion she softened or erased. Rose brings up every failed draft you handed her, every time she had to completely rewrite your pages to make them publishable. You accuse her of stealing your voice. She accuses you of being too stubborn to accept help. Almanzo hears the shouting and comes to the doorway leaning on his cane. He does not say anything. He just stands there, watching two women who need each other tear each other apart. Finally, Rose says that if you do not like the way she edits your work, you are free to submit the next book without her help. Go ahead, she says. Send Harper your original draft. See if they publish it. See if readers love your flat, depressing, factual version as much as they love the book she's been crafting. You want to say yes. You want to prove that you can write a successful book without Rose's interference, but you both know you cannot. Harper expects a certain quality from the Little House books now, a quality that only Rose's professional editing provides. If you submit raw, unedited pages, they will reject them. Or worse, they will publish them and readers will be disappointed, and the entire series will collapse. You are trapped. You need Rose's editing to make the book successful, but Rose's editing is erasing the truth, turning your complicated, painful memories into simple moral fables. And you cannot figure out which is worse, having your story ignored because you told it honestly, or having it celebrated because Rose turned it into a lie. The fight ends without resolution. Rose goes back to her typewriter. You go back to your pencil and tablet. The chapter about Mary's blindness will be published with Rose's revisions, not yours. Readers will fall in love with the perfect, patient Laura, who supported her blind sister with endless grace. They will never know about the real Laura, who sometimes locked herself in the attic and cried from frustration, who sometimes snapped at Mary for being too slow, who sometimes wished everything could go back to the way it was before the fever. Mary is still alive. She's 59 years old, living in South Dakota, completely blind, surviving on whatever help you and the state can provide. You wonder if she will read the books, or rather, have someone read them to her. You wonder what she will think about Rose's version of her blindness, the version where everyone is brave and supportive and no one ever feels resentful or angry or exhausted from the burden of caring for her. You wonder if Mary will recognize the lie, or if she will be grateful for it. That night, you lie in bed and think about burning your notes, the private notes, where you wrote down what really happened. You think about destroying the evidence, letting Rose's version be the only version that survives. Maybe that would be easier. Maybe it would be better if the complicated truth died with you, and only the simple myth remained. But you do not burn the notes. You keep them hidden in a drawer. Because some part of you still believes that the truth matters, even if no one ever wants to hear it. Some part of you still hopes that someday someone will care about the real Laura Ingalls Wilder, the woman who was not perfect, who made mistakes, who felt ugly emotions and failed to be the hero of her own story. Rose is still typing in the next room. The sound is familiar now, constant. The soundtrack of your collaboration. The sound of your memories being transformed into something marketable. The sound of the truth being buried under layers of carefully chosen words. You close your eyes and try to sleep, but you keep seeing Mary's face the day she realized she would never see again. Not Rose's version, where Mary is brave and accepting. The real version, where Mary screamed and cried and raged against the unfairness of it all. That is the memory you will take to your grave. That is the truth that will never make it into the books. You are signing a contract for 3 more books, and you are wondering when you became a commodity. It is 1937, and the Little House books are more successful than anyone expected. Harper wants to lock you in for the long term. They want commitments for future books, guaranteed delivery dates, a reliable pipeline of pioneer nostalgia that they can market to Depression-era families hungry for stories about simpler times. The advance is larger than any you have received before. The contract terms are favourable. This should feel like victory. This should feel like you have finally made it as an author. Instead, it feels like you have signed away the last bits of your life that still belong to you. Rose negotiated the contract. You barely understood half of it. Rose has been handling the business side from the beginning, talking to agents and editors, managing subsidiary rights, negotiating royalty percentages. She is good at it. She understands the publishing industry in a way you never will, and Harper trusts her more than they trust you, even though your name is the one on the covers. The contract requires 5 more books, 5 more chunks of your life carved up and served to readers. Rose already has the plan mapped out. 1 book about the hard winter when you almost starved. 1 about Almanzo's family and his childhood. 1 about your courtship and marriage. 1 about your first years together. Maybe 1 about early motherhood, though Rose is hesitant about that because your baby boy died, and dead babies do not sell well in children's books. You look at the list, and you realise Rose has already decided which parts of your life are worth telling, and which parts will be edited out or ignored. She has decided that readers want to see you grow from child to young woman to wife. She has decided that the story should end with your marriage, or maybe the birth of Rose herself, because happy endings sell better than the decades of failure and poverty that followed. Rose has decided what your life means, and you signed a contract agreeing to let her do it. You ask Rose what will happen after the 5 books are done. Will you finally be allowed to tell the parts she cut out? Will you finally be free to write something that is not filtered through her professional judgment? Rose laughs. She says by the time you finish 5 more books you will be in your 70s. She says you should focus on the work you have committed to, not worry about projects that might never happen. What she does not say, but what you both know, is that Rose controls your literary career now. She controls it because she is the one who makes the words publishable. She controls it because Harper trusts her judgment over yours. She controls it because you need her more than she needs you. You could rebel. You could try to write something without Rose's help, prove that you can succeed on your own. But you know what would happen. The raw, unedited manuscript would be rejected, or it would be published and criticised for not being as good as the Little House books. Critics would say you have lost your touch. Readers would be disappointed, and Rose would be proven right. So you do not rebel. You pick up your pencil and start writing the next book, the one Rose outlined for you, the one that will fit neatly into the mythology she's building. You write about the hard winter, and Rose will make it into a story about family perseverance. You write about courting Almanzo, and Rose will turn it into a sweet romance instead of the complicated, practical arrangement it actually was. The money keeps coming. The royalties from the first 3 books are enough to keep the farm running, to pay for Almanzo's medical needs, to live more comfortably than you have in decades. You are financially secure for the first time in your life, and all it cost was your autonomy, your truth, and your voice. Rose tells you this is what success looks like. She says every successful author has editors and agents and publishers who shape their work. She says collaboration is normal in the publishing industry. She says you should be grateful that someone with her skills is willing to devote so much time to making your books the best they can be. And she is right in a way. You are grateful. You could never have achieved this success without Rose's help. But you're also aware that help has turned into control, and you no longer know where your work ends and Rose's begins. Readers think they are reading Laura Ingalls Wilder. Critics praise your distinctive voice and authentic frontier perspective, but the voice they love is a hybrid, a strange combination of your memories and Rose's craft, and you are not sure which parts are really yours anymore. At night, when you cannot sleep, you think about the books that will never be written. The honest books. The books where you admit that Pa was often wrong, that Ma was sometimes cruel, that your marriage was sometimes miserable, that you failed more than you succeeded. The books where pioneer life is shown as it really was, brutal and dirty and full of people making bad decisions because they had no good options. Those books will never exist. The contract you signed guarantees it. The mythology Rose is building requires it. The readers who have fallen in love with the Little House series would hate it. So you will write the books Rose outlines, you will provide the memories she requests, you will watch her rewrite them into something beautiful and false, and you will cash the checks and tell yourself that this is enough, that financial security is worth the cost, that nobody really wants the truth anyway. Rose is already planning the cover art for the next book. She's already thinking about marketing strategies and potential reviews. She's treating your life like a product line, and you are letting her do it because the alternative is poverty and obscurity. You sign the contract. You shake hands with the editor. You smile for a photograph that will be used to promote the series, and you wonder if the real Laura Ingalls Wilder is already dead. If she died somewhere between the first rejection letter and this room full of people, congratulating you on a success that belongs more to Rose than to you. The contract sits on the table. 5 more books committed, 5 more pieces of your life sold to the highest bidder. And you pick up your pencil and start writing. Because that is what the contract requires. Because that is what success demands. Because you no longer know how to do anything else. You're standing in Rose's room, holding papers you were never supposed to see, and your entire world is cracking open. It is 1938, and Rose is away for a few days, visiting friends in Kansas City. She asked you to water her plants and collect her mail, simple tasks that should have taken 10 minutes. But when you walked into her room, you saw her desk covered in papers, and you made a decision that will change everything. You start looking through the papers. You tell yourself you're just tidying up, organizing the mess. But that is a lie. You're snooping. You're looking for something, though you're not sure what, some evidence of the truth you have been suspecting for years. And you find it. There are drafts of your books, multiple drafts, early versions, middle versions, final versions, but these are not just edited versions of what you wrote. These are complete rewrites, pages and pages in Rose's handwriting, scenes you never wrote, dialogue you never composed, entire chapters that exist only because Rose created them from scratch. You sit down on Rose's bed and you start reading. Your hands are shaking. Here is a scene from Little House in the Big Woods that you thought you wrote. But the draft in your hand is in Rose's handwriting, dated weeks before you even started writing that section. Rose did not edit this scene. She invented it, then told you to write your memories to match what she had already created. Here is a chapter from Little House on the Prairie about the Indians. The early draft is in Rose's hand, with notes in the margins about how to make the scene more dramatic, more tense, more emotionally engaging. Below it is your version, the memories you wrote down, and at the bottom is the final version, which is almost identical to Rose's original draft, with only small touches from your manuscript incorporated. You keep reading, page after page of evidence that Rose has not been editing your work. She's been writing it herself, using your memories as suggestions, as starting points, as raw material to shape into her own creation. You find a letter from Harper's editor, addressed to Rose, praising her for the latest manuscript. Your usual brilliant work, the letter says. Laura's voice comes through so clearly thanks to your skill. The editor is writing to Rose, not to you. The editor knows. Harper knows. Everyone knows except the readers and apparently you. You find notes in Rose's handwriting, planning future books. She has outlined the entire series, decided which events to include and which to ignore, determined the emotional arc of each book and how they will fit together. She has been planning your life like a novelist plans a series of novels, deciding which parts of the truth serve the story and which parts need to be discarded. You find financial records. Rose has been taking a percentage of your royalties, a fact you knew, but the percentage is higher than she told you. She has been negotiating contracts that benefit her as much as they benefit you. She's been treating this collaboration like a business partnership, except you were never fully informed of the terms. The betrayal is so complete, so overwhelming, that for a moment you cannot breathe. You sit on Rose's bed, surrounded by evidence that your daughter has been lying to you for years, and you do not know whether to cry or scream or burn the entire house down. Rose told you she was editing your work. She told you she was just polishing your memories, making them more publishable. She told you the voice was still yours, the stories were still yours, the books were still yours. but the evidence in your hand says otherwise. The books are Rose's. She wrote them. She structured them. She invented scenes and dialogue and emotions. She built the mythology. All you did was provide the raw material, the memories she mined for details and anecdotes. You're not the author of the Little House books. You're the source material, and Rose is the actual author, hiding behind your name, letting you take the credit and the blame while she pulls the strings. You think about all the times Rose insisted on changes you disagreed with. You thought she was being a pushy editor, but she was not editing. She was protecting her own work, defending the story she created from your attempts to inject more truth into it. You think about all the letters from children, praising your writing, admiring your voice. They were praising Rose's writing, Rose's voice. You have been accepting compliments for work you did not do. You think about the contract you signed, committing to 5 more books, books that Rose has already outlined, already planned, already decided how they will sound and feel and what they will mean. You thought you were signing a contract to write your own life story, but you were really signing a contract to let Rose continue using your memories as material for her fiction. The front door opens. Rose is back early. You hear her footsteps coming down the hall. You have seconds to decide what to do with this information, whether to confront her or pretend you never found it, whether to burn down the lie or let it keep standing. Rose appears in the doorway. She sees you sitting on her bed, surrounded by her papers, and her face goes very still. You hold up one of the drafts. You ask her how long she's been lying to you, and Rose, instead of apologizing, instead of looking ashamed, just lights a cigarette and says, "Since the beginning, you were never going to be a real writer on your own, so I made you one." You're staring at your daughter, and you're watching her dismantle every belief you had about your own life. Rose sits down at her desk, perfectly calm, perfectly controlled. She does not look guilty. She looks relieved, like she has been waiting for this confrontation, like she's tired of pretending. She asks if you want the truth. You nod, because you are too angry to speak. Rose says the truth is that you were never going to be published without her. She says your manuscript for Pioneer Girl was terrible, flat and boring and unsellable. She says she tried to edit it, but there was not enough there to save. So she rewrote it. She took your memories and turned them into a story that publishers would want. She created the voice that readers love, the warm and nostalgic tone that makes the books feel like comfort food for the soul. You say that she lied. She said she was editing, not rewriting. She said the books were yours. Rose says the books are yours. Your name is on the cover. Your memories are the foundation. But the actual writing, the craft, the skill that makes those memories into literature, that is hers. And she did not tell you the full extent of her involvement because you would have refused to go along with it, would have insisted on doing it your way, and your way would have failed. You ask why she did not just write the books herself, put her own name on them. Rose laughs, a bitter sound. She says nobody wants to read a novel about frontier life written by a modern woman who has lived in Albania and Paris. Nobody wants fake nostalgia from someone who has never milked a cow or churned butter or survived a blizzard. But you're authentic. You're the real thing. Your name gives the books credibility, makes readers believe they are reading real memories from a real pioneer woman. Rose needed your authenticity, and you needed her skill, so she combined them and created something neither of you could have made alone. You say she should have told you. She should have been honest about what she was doing. Rose says you would not have accepted it. You would have fought her, insisted on keeping control, refused to let her do what needed to be done. So she made the decision to lie. And she has been lying for 7 years, and the result is 5 successful books that have made you financially secure and given you a legacy that will outlast both of you. You ask if she feels any guilt at all. Rose says no. She says she saved you. She took your failed manuscript and turned it into a literary phenomenon. She gave you a career you could never have had on your own. And if the price was your pride, if the cost was admitting that you needed help, then that was a price worth paying. You stand up. You say you want your name taken off the books. If Rose wrote them, then Rose should get the credit. Rose stares at you. She says you cannot do that. The contracts are signed. The books are published. The readers know you as Laura Ingalls Wilder, the author of the Little House series. If you try to change that now, it will destroy everything. The publisher will sue. Readers will feel betrayed. Your reputation will be ruined. And for what? So you can tell the truth that nobody wants to hear. You say the truth matters. Rose says survival matters more. She reminds you that you were broke and desperate when this started. She reminds you that the farm was failing, that Almanzo was sick, that you had no other options. She gave you a way out, and you took it, and now you are trying to pretend you did not know what you were agreeing to. You start to argue, but Rose cuts you off. She says you did know. Maybe you did not know the full extent, but you knew she was rewriting your work. You knew she was changing things, inventing scenes, smoothing out the rough edges. You knew. And you let it happen because you needed the money and the success. You're not a victim. You're a collaborator, a willing participant in the lie. And now you're trying to pretend you were deceived, but the truth is you just did not want to look too closely at what was happening. The words hit you like a slap. Because Rose is right. You did know, not everything, but enough. You knew Rose was making major changes. You knew the final book sounded very different from your original drafts. You knew Rose was doing more than just editing, and you let it happen because the alternative was admitting that you could not succeed on your own, that you needed your daughter to make you into something you were not. You sit back down on the bed. You feel exhausted, defeated. You ask Rose what happens now. Rose says nothing changes. You keep writing the memories. She keeps turning them into books. Harper keeps publishing them. Readers keep buying them. You keep cashing the checks. The collaboration continues, just like it has been, except now you both know exactly what it is. A partnership where Rose does most of the work and you get most of the credit, and both of you benefit from the arrangement. You ask if Rose resents you for it, for getting the fame while she does the work in secret. Rose is quiet for a long moment. Then she says yes. She resents it. She has written 5 successful books and received almost no recognition for it. She has created a literary phenomenon and has to watch critics praise her mother's natural storytelling gift and authentic voice when Rose is the one who crafted every sentence. She has sacrificed her own writing career to build yours, and nobody knows, nobody thanks her, nobody even suspects. But Rose also knows that this is the only way it works. Her name does not sell books. Your name does. Your authentic pioneer experience is what readers want. Rose is just the invisible craftsman, the ghost in the machine, the secret author of someone else's life. You ask if this bothers her. Rose says it used to, but she has made peace with it. She has decided that legacy matters more than credit. The Little House books will survive long after both of you are dead. Children will read them for generations, and Rose knows that she created that legacy, even if the world never acknowledges it. You sit in silence, processing everything. The revelation, the confession, the uncomfortable truth that you were more complicit than you wanted to admit. Finally, you ask Rose one more question. Are any of the books really yours? Is there any part of them that is actually your voice, your words, your truth? Rose looks at you. She says yes. The memories are yours. The foundation is yours. The emotional core of the stories, the love for your family, the nostalgia for a lost time, that is all yours. Rose just gave it shape. She gave it structure and polish and marketability. But the heart of the books, the part that makes readers cry, that comes from you. You do not know if you believe her. You do not know if the heart of the books is really yours, or if Rose created that too, invented emotions and nostalgia to match what she thought would sell. But you also know that it does not matter anymore. The books exist. The readers love them. The collaboration is permanent whether you like it or not. Rose picks up the papers scattered on the bed. She puts them away in a drawer, hiding the evidence again. She tells you to go back to your writing, to finish the chapter you were working on. She will edit it, like always, and it will become another piece of the mythology. You leave Rose's room, you go back to your desk, pick up your pencil, and stare at the blank page in front of you. and you wonder if anything you write from now on will ever really be yours, or if everything will belong to Rose, the woman behind the curtain, the ghost author of your life. You're writing a chapter about your wedding day, and you cannot remember if any of it is true anymore. It is late 1938, and you are working on what will eventually become These Happy Golden Years, the book about your courtship and marriage to Almanzo. Rose wants it to be romantic, sweet, a perfect conclusion to your journey from child to young woman. She wants readers to close the book feeling satisfied, believing that all the hardships were worth it because they led to true love. But your wedding day was not romantic, it was practical. You married Almanzo because he was a farmer with land and you needed security. You were 18 years old, and you had no other prospects, no other options for a future that did not involve staying in your parents' failing household forever. You did not love Almanzo, not then. Love came later, if it came at all. The wedding was a transaction, a survival strategy, a young woman making the best choice available to her in a world that did not offer many choices. But that is not the story Rose wants to tell. Rose wants a love story. Rose wants readers to believe that you and Almanzo were soulmates, that you chose each other freely, that your marriage was the happy ending everyone was waiting for. So Rose has outlined the chapter for you. She wants you to write about being nervous but excited, about looking forward to starting your life with the man you love. She wants you to describe your wedding dress, the simple ceremony, the joy you felt. She wants you to create a memory that fits the narrative, even if it means inventing emotions you never felt. You stare at the blank page. You try to write what Rose wants. But the words feel false, hollow, like you're writing someone else's wedding instead of your own. You remember the real wedding day. You remember standing in the parlour of the preacher's house, wearing a borrowed dress because you could not afford a new one. You remember Almanzo beside you, practical and steady, not the romantic hero of a storybook. You remember saying the vows and feeling relieved, not joyful. Relieved that you had a future, that you would not be a burden on your parents anymore, that you had made a decision and followed through with it. There was no romance. There was no fairy tale moment. There was just a 19-year-old man and an 18-year-old girl making a practical arrangement that would help them both survive. But Rose does not want the truth. Rose wants the fairy tale. And after your confrontation about the drafts, after Rose's confession that she has been writing most of the books herself, you know that if you do not give Rose what she wants, she will just write it herself anyway. So you compromise. You write a version of the wedding that is halfway between truth and fiction. You write about being nervous, which was true, but you frame it as romantic nervousness instead of existential dread. You write about the ceremony, which was real, but you add details about how handsome Almanzo looked, about the warmth you felt standing beside him. You write about your dress, but you make it sound nicer than it was. You write a wedding scene that is based on reality, but improved, sanitized, made palatable for readers who want happy endings. You hand the pages to Rose. She reads them and nods with approval. "This is good," she says. "This is exactly what the book needs. Readers will love it," and you feel something inside you break. Because you have just written a lie about one of the most important days of your life, and you did it willingly without even fighting. You have become complicit in the mythology. You are no longer the victim of Rose's editing. You are a co-conspirator, actively participating in the creation of a false history. Rose takes your pages and starts typing. She will make them better, smoother, more emotionally resonant. She will add touches that make the scene more vivid, more romantic, more perfect. And when readers read the final version, they will believe this is how your wedding actually happened. They will believe you married for love, not survival. They will believe your life was a fairy tale. You think about the real Almanzo sitting in the next room, 71 years old and barely able to walk. You've been married for 51 years. It has not been a fairy tale. It has been hard work and disappointment and compromise. You have fought and failed and survived together, but it has never been the romance that Rose is writing. And Almanzo will never read these books. He has no interest in them. He thinks the whole thing is foolish, turning your life into stories for children. He does not know that Rose has been rewriting your marriage into something it never was. He does not know that readers think he was a romantic hero instead of a practical farmer who needed a wife and made a sensible choice. Maybe that is for the best. Maybe it is better that Almanzo never knows how Rose has transformed him, turned him into a character in a love story, stripped away his flaws and complications and made him into someone two-dimensional and perfect. You finish the chapter about your wedding and move on to the next one, about your first years of marriage. Rose has already outlined what she wants, the struggles of starting out, the joy of building a home together, the love that sustained you through hardships. What she does not want is the truth, the crop failures, the debt, the desperation, the baby who died, the diphtheria that nearly killed Almanzo and left him disabled, the years of barely surviving while everyone around you seemed to be doing fine. You write what Rose wants, you give her the raw material for another chapter of the myth, and you watch her transform it into something beautiful and false. This is your life now. This is what success looks like. You provide memories, and Rose turns them into marketable fiction. You get the credit, and Rose does the work. You both benefit from the lie, and you both know it. The Little House books will be your legacy. Children will read them for generations. They will learn about pioneer life from your stories. They will believe they understand what the frontier was like, what your life was like, what America was like in the years before the modern world. And it will all be based on a carefully constructed mythology, created by a desperate mother and her ambitious daughter, two women who needed each other and sacrificed the truth to survive. You close your tablet, you put down your pencil, you look at the stack of pages you have written, memories transformed into fiction, truth buried under layers of narrative craft, and you wonder if anyone will ever dig deep enough to find what is real, or if the myth is all that will remain when you are gone. You're 70 years old and you have just realised that you no longer exist outside of the books. It is 1937 and you have published 6 Little House books. The 7th, these happy golden years, is almost finished. Rose is typing the final chapters, perfecting the romantic ending she has crafted for your courtship story. And you are sitting at the kitchen table, reading a letter from a woman in Nebraska who says she feels like she knows you better than she knows her own mother. The letter is 12 pages long. The woman describes in detail her favourite scenes from the books, quotes passages from memory, analyses your character and your choices. She writes about how you have inspired her, how your courage and optimism have helped her through hard times, how she wishes she could be more like you. And you read this letter, and you realise with a sick feeling in your stomach that she is not talking about you. She's talking about the character Rose created. She is in love with a fictional version of you that has never existed. This has been happening more and more. The letters arrive by the dozens, sometimes hundreds. Children writing to say you are their hero. Adults writing to say the books remind them of their own childhoods, even though they never lived on the frontier. Teachers writing to say they use your books to teach American history, even though the history in the books is sanitized and simplified, and sometimes entirely invented. You have become famous. Not rich, but famous. People recognize your name. Newspapers want to interview you. Libraries want you to come speak at events. You are Laura Ingalls Wilder, beloved children's author, chronicler of the pioneer spirit, voice of authentic American experience. But the person they think you are does not exist. That Laura is Rose's creation, a carefully constructed character built from fragments of your memories and held together by Rose's skill. The real you, bitter, tired, scarred by decades of failure, has been erased. In her place is a woman who is warm and wise and endlessly optimistic, who overcame every hardship with grace, who never gave up hope, who represents everything admirable about the American frontier. You try to write back to the woman from Nebraska. You try to explain that the Laura in the books is not completely accurate, that real life was harder and uglier than the stories make it sound. But Rose reads your draft and tells you to rewrite it. She says you cannot undermine the books. You cannot tell readers that the stories are partially fictionalized. It will destroy their faith in the series. It will hurt sales. So you write a cheerful letter instead. You thank the woman for her kind words. You tell her you're glad the books have meant so much to her. You sign it Laura Ingalls Wilder, and you send it off, knowing that it is just one more lie in a mountain of lies you've been building for 7 years. Rose comes into the kitchen with the final manuscript. These Happy Golden Years is done. She hands it to you to read, to approve, to sign off on. You read through it, and it is beautiful. It is the perfect conclusion to the series. It ends with your wedding, with hope and promise, with the suggestion that all the hardships were worth it because they led to this moment of happiness. But you know what happened after the wedding. You know about the years of crop failures and debt. You know about the baby who died. You know about the diphtheria that nearly destroyed your family. You know that the happy golden years were followed by decades of struggle that only ended when you started writing these books. But Rose does not want to write about that. She wants the series to end on a high note, wants readers to close the final book feeling satisfied and hopeful. She wants them to believe that hard work and optimism lead to happy endings. She wants them to believe the myth. You ask Rose what happens now. The series is essentially complete. You have written about your childhood, your adolescence, your courtship. There is nowhere left to go except into the years that Rose does not want to write about. The years of failure and loss. Rose says you are done. The series is over. You can retire now, live off the royalties, enjoy the success you have earned. She says it with finality, as if she has decided that your life story has reached its natural conclusion and there is nothing more worth telling. And you realise she's right. The interesting part of your life, the part that makes good stories, ended when you were 18. Everything after that, your marriage, your years as a farmer's wife, your middle age and old age, is too depressing for the brand Rose has built. The Laura Ingalls Wilder that readers love stops existing at age 18. The rest of your life is irrelevant. You're 70 years old. You have lived for 52 years since the end of These Happy Golden Years, but those 52 years do not count. They are not part of the official story. They have been erased from the mythology. Rose is already planning her next project. She's talking about writing a novel of her own, something that is not tied to your life, something that belongs entirely to her. She's ready to move on. She has spent 7 years building your legacy, and now she wants to focus on her own work. You watch her leave the kitchen, energized and excited about her next book. And you sit there, holding the manuscript of These Happy Golden Years, feeling like you have just attended your own funeral. The Laura Ingalls Wilder that the world loves is complete. She has had her story told, from birth to marriage, and now she can be filed away on library shelves, frozen forever at age 18, never aging, never changing, never revealing the complicated, difficult decades that followed. And the real you, the 70-year-old woman sitting in a farmhouse in Missouri, is just a ghost. You are the person who provided the raw material for a character. But you are not the character, and the world does not care about you. They care about her. You fold the letter from Nebraska and put it in a drawer with all the others. Letters from people who love someone who does not exist. Letters addressed to a ghost. And you wonder if this is what legacy feels like. Hollow, empty, like watching someone else live your life while you fade into the background, forgotten. You're watching Rose pack her typewriter, and you're realizing that she is not just leaving the farm, she's leaving you. It is 1938, and Rose has decided to move out. She says she needs her own space, her own life, her own career separate from yours. She has bought a house in Danbury, Connecticut, far from Missouri, far from you. She says she will visit, of course, but she needs distance. She needs to be her own person, instead of just your editor, your collaborator, your ghostwriter. You should be relieved. You and Rose have been fighting more frequently since you discovered the extent of her rewriting. The house feels too small for both of you, too full of tension and resentment and unspoken accusations. Rose leaving should feel like freedom, but it does not. It feels like abandonment. Because without Rose, you're not a writer anymore. Without Rose's editing, your manuscripts are flat and unsellable. Without Rose's professional judgment, you have no career. The Little House books are successful because of the collaboration. And if Rose is leaving, the collaboration is over. You ask Rose what you're supposed to do now. The series is finished, but Harper has been hinting that they want more books. They want stories about Almanzo's childhood, about your early married years, about anything else you can provide to keep the Little House brand alive. Rose says you can write those books if you want. She will still edit them, but from Connecticut. You can mail her the manuscripts and she will mail back the revisions. The collaboration can continue just at a distance. But you both know it will not be the same. The intensive daily work sessions where Rose rewrote pages while you watched, where she explained what worked and what did not, where you argued about every detail, those are over. From now on, Rose will be a distant editor, not a partner. And the books, if you write more, will be more yours and less hers, which means they will be worse. Rose finishes packing. She loads her car with boxes of papers, her typewriter, her clothes. She's methodical, efficient, eager to leave, and you stand in the doorway, watching her erase herself from your home, and you feel something you have not felt in years. Fear. Fear that without Rose, you will disappear. Fear that the Laura Ingalls Wilder that the world loves only exists because Rose created her, and if Rose is gone, that Laura will fade away. Fear that you are nothing without your daughter's skill, nothing without the mythology she built. Rose hugs you goodbye. It is awkward, stiff. You have never been a physically affectionate family. She tells you to take care of yourself, to keep writing if you want to enjoy the success you have earned. She does not say, "we have earned." She says, "you have earned," as if the books were entirely yours, as if her contribution was minimal. But you both know the truth, and the truth is standing between you like a wall neither of you knows how to climb. Rose gets in her car, she drives away, and you watch her go. This daughter who saved you and betrayed you, who built your career and stole your voice, who knows too much about who you really are and chose to invent someone better. The house is quiet without Rose's typewriter. The silence is oppressive. You sit at your desk and try to write, but the words do not come. You try to work on an idea for another book, stories about Almanzo's childhood on a farm in New York. But without Rose sitting across from you, editing as you go, the words feel wrong. They sound flat, boring. Exactly like the first manuscript that every publisher rejected. You realise that you have forgotten how to write without Rose. Or maybe you never knew how to write at all. Maybe Rose was right all along. Maybe you were never a real writer. Maybe you were just a source of raw material, and Rose was the actual author, and now that she is gone, you have nothing left. The royalty checks keep coming. The books keep selling. Children keep writing letters to tell you how much they love the stories. But you know the truth. You know that what they love is Rose's creation, not yours. And now Rose has moved on, left you behind, gone off to write her own books under her own name, and you're stuck here in Missouri, playing the role of Laura Ingalls Wilder for the rest of your life, signing autographs, answering fan mail, giving interviews where you smile and talk about the pioneer days and pretend that the woman in the books is the real you. You have become a performer in a play Rose wrote, and the performance will continue until you die because you have no idea how to be anyone else anymore. That night you lie in bed and think about Rose driving across the country to her new house, her new life. You think about how eager she was to leave, how ready she was to escape. And you wonder what it says about your relationship that Rose could not wait to put 1,000 miles between you. You think about all the years you spent together, working on the books, fighting about the books, building the mythology. You sacrificed your truth. Rose sacrificed her credit. You both gave up something important, and the result was a success that neither of you can fully claim. But Rose is done now. She has given you 7 years of her life, 7 years of her skill, and she's ready to move on. She's 41 years old, and she wants a career of her own, recognition of her own, a legacy that does not hide behind someone else's name. And you cannot blame her for that. You cannot blame her for wanting credit for her work. You cannot blame her for being tired of being invisible, but you also cannot forgive her for leaving, for creating you and then abandoning you. For building the Laura Ingalls Wilder that the world loves and then walking away, leaving you to maintain the illusion alone. The house creaks in the wind, Almanzo snores in the next room, and you lie awake, 71 years old, famous and hollow, wondering if this is what success always costs, everything you were in exchange for becoming someone you are not. You are burning papers in the fireplace, and you are erasing the evidence of the truth. It is 1939, and you have made a decision. You're going to destroy the notes you kept, the private journal where you wrote down what really happened, the memories that did not make it into the books. You are going to burn the proof that the Little House series is partially fiction, that Rose rewrote most of it, that the Laura Ingalls Wilder the world loves is a carefully constructed character. You feed the pages into the fire one by one. Your real memories of Pa, the ones where he was harsh and distant and sometimes cruel. Your real memories of Ma, the ones where she was bitter and exhausted and resentful of the poverty that defined her life. Your real memories of Mary's blindness, of your wedding day, of the years of failure that followed. All of it burns. All of it turns to ash. You're doing this because Rose asked you to. Before she left for Connecticut, she told you that those notes were dangerous. If anyone ever found them, if they ever compared your private memories to the published books, they would see the discrepancies. They would figure out that the books are not completely true. They would start asking questions about who really wrote them, about how much was Rose's work and how much was yours, and Rose does not want those questions asked. She wants the mythology to stand. She wants the Little House books to be accepted as authentic pioneer memoirs, not questioned as collaborative fiction. She wants your legacy to be secure, and the only way to ensure that is to destroy the evidence that contradicts it. So you are burning the truth. You are erasing the real Laura Ingalls Wilder so that Rose's version can survive unchallenged. Part of you wants to stop. Part of you wants to save these papers, hide them somewhere safe, leave them for future generations to find. Because these notes are proof that you are real, that you existed as more than just a character in children's books. These notes are the only remaining evidence of the complicated, flawed human woman you actually were. But another part of you knows Rose is right. If these notes survive, they will destroy the books. They will reveal the collaboration, expose the rewrites, undermine the authenticity that makes the series valuable. And what would that accomplish? It would not change the past. It would just hurt your legacy and Rose's, so you let them burn. Page after page of truth, turning to smoke and ash. The last page is a letter you wrote to yourself years ago, back when you first started working with Rose. You wrote it after a particularly bad fight about her edits. In the letter, you described your frustration with Rose's control, your anger at having your words rewritten, your fear that you were losing yourself in the collaboration. You read it one more time, then you feed it into the fire and watch it burn. When the last page is ash, you sit back and stare at the fireplace. The truth is gone. The only version of your life that will survive is the one Rose created. Future readers will never know the difference between what really happened and what Rose invented. They will believe the books are pure memoir, authentic pioneer memories, the real story of a real family. And maybe that is for the best. Maybe the world does not need the truth. Maybe what they need is the myth, the comforting story about brave pioneers who overcame hardship through love and hard work. Maybe Rose was right all along. Maybe the emotional truth is more important than the factual truth. Or maybe you're just too tired to keep fighting, too tired to protect the truth, too tired to care whether anyone ever knows the real Laura Ingalls Wilder. You are 72 years old now. Almanzo is 72 as well, barely able to walk, spending most of his days in a chair by the window. The farm is failing again. Without Rose's help, you're struggling financially. The royalties from the books are good, but not enough to cover everything. You might have to sell the farm, move into town, spend your final years in a small house with no land. The irony is not lost on you. You wrote books about pioneer life, about your family's struggle to build farms and make them succeed. And in the end, you failed at the same thing your parents failed at. You could not keep the farm. You could not make the land provide. You survived, but you did not triumph. But the books will not tell that story. The books end with hope and promise, and the suggestion that hard work pays off. The books lie. And now, with the evidence burned, no one will ever be able to prove it. You stand up, your joints aching, your back sore. You're getting old. You will not live forever. And when you die, the truth will die with you. Rose will survive, keeping the secret, protecting the mythology. And readers will continue to believe that the Little House books are exactly what they appear to be. Authentic memoirs of a pioneer childhood. You walk to the window and look out at the farm, at the land you have worked for 50 years. It looks the same as always. The same hills, the same trees, the same hard Missouri soil that never quite gave you what you needed. You think about Rose in Connecticut, writing her own books now, building her own career. You think about the 7 years she spent creating your legacy instead of her own. You think about the resentment she must feel, the anger at being invisible, the frustration of watching you get credit for her work, and you think about the ways you failed her. The ways you were not the mother she needed, the ways you demanded too much and gave too little, the ways you let her sacrifice herself to save you. Rose never wanted children. She made that clear from the time she was young. She saw what motherhood did to you, the exhaustion, the poverty, the loss of self. She saw what it cost, and she decided it was not worth paying. She chose freedom instead, chose independence, chose to build a life that was entirely her own. But then you asked her to give it up. You asked her to come back to Missouri, to help you, to spend years of her life building your career instead of her own. And she did it, because you were her mother and you needed her and she could not say no. What did that cost her? What did she give up to save you? What resentments is she carrying? What anger is festering beneath the surface? What hatred is growing in the space between what she wanted for herself and what you demanded from her? You wonder if Rose hates you. You wonder if every sentence she wrote for the books was an act of love or an act of obligation or an act of revenge. You wonder if she created the perfect pioneer mother in fiction because the real mother disappointed her so completely. You wonder if the generational trauma that defined your childhood, the poverty, the failure, the constant moving, the inability to ever feel safe, has been passed down to Rose in different forms. Not physical poverty, but emotional poverty. Not hunger for food, but hunger for recognition. Not moving from place to place, but never feeling at home anywhere. You wonder if you broke your daughter the same way the frontier broke you. The fire in the fireplace has died down to embers. The evidence is ash. The truth is gone. And you are left with the myth, the books, the legacy that will outlive you. The Little House series will survive for generations. Children will read them and fall in love with the pioneer life they describe. Adults will read them and feel nostalgic for a past they never experienced. And no one will ever know the whole truth. No one will ever know how much of the books were Rose's invention. No one will ever know what you sacrificed to create them, or what Rose sacrificed to help you. The secret will die with you. And maybe, someday, it will die with Rose too. But before that happens, before Rose takes the secret to her grave, there are questions that need answers. Questions about why a daughter would give up her own career to build her mother's. Questions about why a woman who could have had anything chose to hide behind someone else's name. Questions about the resentment and anger and hatred that must have been growing all those years, poisoning the relationship between mother and daughter, turning love into something twisted and complicated and dangerous. Questions about what happens when a child is forced to parent her own parent, when success requires sacrifice, when legacy is built on lies. Questions about generational trauma and how it passes from mother to daughter like an inheritance neither of them wanted. You turn away from the window. The farm is quiet. Almanzo is asleep. The house is empty without Rose, and somewhere in Connecticut, Rose is sitting at her typewriter, working on her own book, her own words, her own story, a story that has nothing to do with you, unless it has everything to do with you, unless every word Rose writes from now on is haunted by the years she spent writing for you instead of herself, unless the resentment has finally grown too large to contain, unless the daughter has secrets of her own that are darker than anything you ever imagined. To be continued.